War is a widespread occurrence that has happened throughout all of time. Go into any period of history, you will most likely see that there was a war that had occurred between one group and another. It's something we've come to accept as a never-ending cycle for the rest of time. Most wars are fought between feuding countries, man versus man. This war is somewhat peculiar though, because this is a war with the emu. After World War I ended, large amounts of British vets were given land by the Australian government in which to grow crops on. Since the coming years were the start of the Great Depression, the government asked for them to increase the amount of wheat crops they were growing in favor of assistance in the form of subsidies. However, the government failed to deliver on their promise of subsidies as prices of wheat kept dropping year by year. In October of 1932 things began to escalate, as the farmers threatened to not deliver their season's worth of crops. Things would only get worse for the farmers as 20,000 emu were beginning their migration. While migrating inland, they found that the cultivated lands were a good place to settle due to the cleared land and mass amount of water supply available. They then began to invade the farmlands and began to destroy the crops. When the emu got into the crops, they broke a large hole in the side of the fence, which also allowed for rabbits to come in and finish what little crops would have been left. The farmers, being veterans of the war, banded together with rifles to attempt to kill the emu themselves. However, their attempts were futile, as the emu were too fast for standard rifles. After their failed attempts, they went to the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pierce. The veterans knew the power of the machine guns and requested their deployment. Once requested, Pierce told them that the rifles would need to be used by military personnel, and that for the service of hunting the emu, the farmers would provide payment for ammunition and food for the soldiers. One reason Pierce was so quick for the deployment of the soldiers was that he said that the emu would make good target practice. The main reason for their support was to reduce tension between farmers against the government, as they haven't held promise to help. So they saw this as payment. Once they began to make their move, George Pierce deployed Major G.P.W. Meredith along with him commanding Sergeant S. McMurray and Gunner J. O'Halloran, armed with 2 machine guns as well as 10,000 rounds of ammunition. On November 2nd, 1932 was when they made their first attempts to hunt the emu. They came upon a mob of at least 50 of them when they began to open fire. But they were too far away from the emu to even have a great effect on them. So once they were startled, the emu broke out into 5 groups and made their escape. This attempt left them with about only 12 emu killed. The next encounter with the emu was on November 4th, where Meredith had spotted almost 1,000 emu near a local dam. Once the birds were close enough in proximity, they began to fire until the guns jammed, after only killing 12 emu. This inconvenience allowed for the rest of the emu to make an escape unharmed, ending in yet another failed attempt to kill the emu. Meredith's next plan was to strap one of the machine guns to a truck and chase the emu that way. But that plan was not effective, as the truck was unable to catch up to the emu, and the ride was so bumpy that the gun was unable to hit any of the emu. On November 8th, the Australian House of Representatives had a meeting about the situation. Later that day, George Pierce had withdrawn the 3 soldiers from hunting the emu. So this technically meant that the emu won the war, a war they weren't even fighting. Since there was still a call to kill the emu by the farmers, the government just put in place a bounty system that would prove to work much more efficiently, as over 50,000 emu were killed in 1934 over only a 6-month period. Now you may be asking, why didn't they just do the bounty system in the first place? My answer would be, because Australia.